Hello and welcome. My name is Thomas Kevin Dolan, author and writer of Little Fag, a journey of self-acceptance and healing. And today I'm honored to read chapter 8. The title of that chapter is Letting the Old Script Go. It begins on page 255 of my memoir. I do not remember who asked me these questions, but answering them felt vital to a way forward. How would it feel to let go of your story? How would it feel to open your heart? How would it feel to stop pretending you were perfect? What I braved. What terrified me most when I was invited to consider letting go of my story was that I didn't really know what my story was. I knew I whined because things didn't go my way. As much as a part of me did not want to acknowledge the pity party I created for myself, I gave myself permission and justified needing to go there sometimes. Letting it go was terrifying. It had become a part of who I was, or at least that was my story. I had no idea that the state of self-pity was supposed to be temporary, yet it had become more or less a place I was comfortable residing. The victims I described as my family members were who I now identified as. Sure, crises, traumas, dysfunction, enabling, and other difficulties had occurred in my life, particularly as a little boy. From them, I learned to survive. These and those circumstances also contributed to smashing my hopes, and a part of me was devastated by the smashing. But being a perpetual victim was now the risk. The work of reflecting on letting go the story helped me to identify the belief systems I, as a person with a victim identity, was living by. I'd had an array of internal conversations that served only to keep me stuck. The theme usually centered around life being really, really hard. I'd leaned in with a commentary about not being able to get back up because if I did, I'd just get kicked back down again. I was incessantly reminding myself to beware, always beware of trickery. It's around every corner. I shouldn't trust anyone. I especially couldn't trust the universe. Much of the time, I'd lament, probably for the sake of lamenting, that I can't. No one understands how hard it is for me. My greatest statement that kept me stuck was the lie that everyone was picking on me. And they are always bigger, badder, smarter than me. They will also and always have more than me. These beliefs protected me. I coped by staying on the downside of life. I never expected more. Although I may not have been able to hear the offers for changing my life because, as a victim, I came back with a long list of yes, buts. I know there were people there to help me, but the student wasn't ready. The truth was that I needed to keep believing that life was hard, or it might just get a whole lot harder. I became an expert at self-sabotage. The secondary gain for me was getting people to stay and take care of or fix me. I have been the bully, manipulating others into all kinds of caregiving, from providing for me to literally making all of my choices. I knew exactly what buttons to push to get others to begin or continue to take care of me. Why would I give up this gig? It's tough to admit, but all these beliefs were magical thinking for me at one time. After all, they kept me alive. Today, they aren't the life forces I believe in. I use them as a way to make sure I was not going to take full responsibility for my life. The new place I learned to live from was my authentic self. It wasn't easy, But I began to realize and recognize that being a victim was the mask and costume that I wore. Within me was someone who was strong and capable and on whom I could rely. This was the time when I first discovered my own superhero. What I braved in entertaining the notion of letting go of my story was the possibility of living from a place of vulnerability and a place of not knowing. Both I would learn in time would teach me how to be the most courageous version of myself. The unlearning. Like so many, I struggled with perfectionism for much of my life. I knew I wasn't perfect, but there was no way I was going to show the world anything other than my perfect self. This began my journey of what I call waking up, or walking through my life awake. This inspired me to consider stopping the pretense that I was perfect. On the second day of an experiential weekend called the Shadow Process, created by the late Debbie Ford, I literally fumbled and dropped my whole idea of what being perfect meant to me. With my pink water bottle in hand, walking along the San Diego Bay seawall, heading for day 2 of the weekend, I suddenly stumbled, and my water bottle crashed to the sidewalk. It was dented, scratched, and nasty looking. My first instinct was to march back to the hotel room and pick up a spare water bottle, since this one was no longer perfect. And there it was. I stood aghast, suddenly realizing this is what I do. I refuse to hold any part of myself or hang on to anything I think isn't perfect. Worse still, I'll walk miles backwards to cover it up. Let go of or replace anything that resembles imperfection. Tears began to stream down my face with the realization of how scared I was to let anyone see any part of me that wasn't perfect. So instead of retrieving my backup water bottle, I continued my walk to start day 2, having no idea what was in store for me. I did notice feeling uncomfortable carrying a water bottle that was no longer pristine, chip-free, and pretty. The lead facilitator, Debbie Ford, stood on stage and asked, "So, who wants to share what they discovered about themselves as a result of what we did yesterday?" 2 things happened to me. Okay, 3. First, a nervous shot of energy ran through me. This felt familiar. It was a feeling I got when I was at risk of showing a part of me that wasn't really perfect. I hated that feeling. Second, I felt an immense calm that was completely unfamiliar to me. Third, I raised my hand. Rising to my feet in front of more than 150 people, I felt nauseated. A microphone was placed in my hands, and this is what came out of my mouth. This morning, I dropped my pink water bottle while walking here. It was pristine without a scratch. It was shiny and new, just the way I'd like you to perceive me. I could feel my heart pounding. I took a breath and continued to share. As the bottle rolled to a stop, all marred from the descent it just took, my first thought was to run back to the hotel room, ditch it, and come back with a new one. I always have a plan B when it comes to hiding what is really going on for me. I felt the people in the room stop breathing. I continued. It dawned on me that what I do, even when what I have or who I am is scratched and dented, is to pretend that I'm perfect. My shadow process colleagues nervously giggled. It was a clue that they knew what it was I was about to share. I found the courage in that moment of sharing to finally stop pretending I was perfect. Sharing the imperfections of who I am has brought me joy, authenticity, and a whole host of relationships that reflect back to me that perfectionism, according to Brené Brown, is merely a 200-pound shield I hold up to hide the real me from the world. All I ever received from the charade was exhaustion. The unlearning I allowed myself to have by giving myself permission to stop pretending to be perfect was the release of the lie that the Dolan family was perfect. I no longer had to lie to cover up my family's humanity. I no longer had to lie to cover up my humanity. In short, I gifted myself with freedom. At the same time, dropping things left and right, I've never felt more empowered, and I've never felt more brave. Do you have moments where you are in a circumstance, something happens, and that thing that happened kind of cascades in slow motion? That was my moment with a pink water bottle. As it fell from my hands, I looked down, and in perhaps super slow motion, I watched it crashing towards the seawall. And there was nothing I could do. I don't think I exclaimed anything. Oftentimes it's anger, but in this particular case, I didn't. I merely looked at it, kind of followed it forward as it rolled and got more scratched. And it stopped. And I picked it up. And of course, you now know what went through my mind and my heart. But as I reflect on and share with you a little bit more depth to that story, I now realize, in this moment I realize what was at play for me. It was this grand setup by the universe. For me to be able to realize how often had life dropped me. And in its dropping, and in the slow motion of being dropped and falling towards something that I would hit that would be painful, how long would I allow myself to continue to roll along and to be dented and be scratched? And I'm going to assert that I allowed that to happen a lot longer than it needed to happen. And of course, it happened because it happened. The reason it happened is because it happened. So I'm not going to argue with reality. But here's my realization with you in this moment that I've not had before. Wow, the pink water bottle showed me how I'd fallen many times in my life, had rolled, at times never gotten up, at times never tended to my scratches and dents, never showed them to anybody else, and ultimately hid them. I hid them. And that moment in San Diego was an opportunity to stop. I didn't know metaphorically that's what the water bottle was about. Not until now. And of course it was pink. I remember being really brave when I first came out wearing pink, because I certainly didn't wear that color when I was in the closet. This was a pink water bottle. Here's the cosmic setup for myself. First of all, I did it. Number two, I listened to the universe's whispers around this opportunity to heal. This idea of stopping being the energy, the archetype of a victim. I'm the one that did it all. I had no idea that I would come to realize that the falling that the pink water bottle represented was the falling that had occurred in my life. Whether I had fallen, whether I was pushed, it didn't matter. The key was, how would I get back up? And on this particular day, the water bottle fell. And when I picked it up, it was a representation of me, that I could look at it, I could acknowledge the dents and the scratches, and here's the thing that's most important for me. I could love the dents and scratches. And then when I walked into that room and sat down and put up my hand, when Debbie said, "So what did you learn?" I was willing to pick up the dented version of myself and no longer be ashamed, no longer to hide. And I can still remember the love that came at me, the applause that erupted, because I wasn't just allowing people to see me, I was allowing people to see themselves. And Debbie would eventually point that out to the group. You know that this story that Thomas just shared is about you. Where have you attempted to be perfect? Where have you not wanted the world to see the dents and scratches? Where have you gone and picked something up to cover up those and never did the work around grieving that, healing that, and ultimately moving yourself to a place where that no longer was the way that you would choose to move through the world?